Welcome in, Falcons fans. It's your boy Russell's back at it again for more Atlanta Falcons coverage of their training camp leading into the preseason. And obviously, when we do this, we bring special guests on. And today we have a guy who's been a part of the show multiple times. If you've been keeping up with the channel, Miles Garrett from Fox 5 Sports in Atlanta, anchor and reporter out there. You may have seen him on TV. You may have seen him around on other content creators pods in the community. Miles, how are you doing today, man?
Doing pretty good, Bryce. Enjoying the Florida sun down here. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, man. I'm doing all right, man. Not as good as probably you are down there. Everybody. It's like even though you're covering the team, you're going to Miami or down to South Florida. So always a bit of some people are jealous. But obviously you've been there for joint practices the last couple of days before their preseason game with the Miami Dolphins on Friday. So I wanted to get your thoughts on what you've seen. But starting with some sad news off the rip. Rondale Moore went down yesterday with an injury. Seems like it was non-contact injury from what we read, and he was put in the air cast before going to the hospital. Can you talk about that moment for a second, how the team responded to that moment and everything around it?
Yeah, so obviously a very unfortunate situation with Rondale Moore. Happened almost right in front of me, actually. It appeared to be a non-contact injury. I wasn't obviously looking, at his knee when it happened, but looked like he was braking on a route sort of at the corner of the end zone, and he went down, and obviously he was in a lot of pain. He was kind of audibly screaming, and the players came over there. The whole team basically took a knee. Coach Morris ended practice early as soon as that happened. So definitely not what you want to see. He was immediately carted off the field. So, your mind kind of assumes the worst. We don't have an update quite yet, but I think you can kind of put two and two together knowing it's pretty serious with what happened here. But it's unfortunate because, Rondale Moore probably looking to be your number 3, maybe number 4 receiver here in this offense. Obviously we're figuring Drake London Darnell Mooney, your number 2. But you bring in a guy like Rondale Moore, supposed to have a pretty good impact for this team. But very unfortunate news there yesterday. But other than that, joint practices down here in Miami have looked very good. I think it's been fairly even the first couple of days we've been down here. Obviously you're going to see some things that, it's some unfamiliarity for a lot of the teams. They're facing off against another opponent for the very first time. And there's going to be some unfamiliarity there. Michael Penix Jr. and Kirk Cousins both had, I think, slower starts, but then kind of settled into a groove there. The Falcons defensive line actually has had a really good joint practice session against Miami. They've been able to beat the offensive line quite a bit down here, which I think is a very positive thing, given maybe some of the concerns there, especially at edge rusher. I know the Falcons have had some concerns there, or at least from the fan perspective. And then, of course, there's been a battle for cornerback too. Mike Hughes and Clark Phillips. Look, it's really hard to go up against Tyreek Hill as the baseline for who should win that battle. Mike Hughes got burned pretty bad by Cheetah on one of the routes there. It's like a 50-yard touchdown. But both him and Clark Phillips seem to settle in. It looks like right now Mike Hughes has the edge over Clark as that cornerback too, and as well as Richie Grant having the edge over DeMarco Helms at that other safety spot opposite Jesse Bates. So that's what it's looking like so far. We're going to find out a lot more on Friday.
Yeah, definitely in the first preseason game, first time of live action. Now, going back to what you mentioned about the quarterbacks, for Kirk Cousins, this was important because this may be the only time of the entire preseason he'll be going against another team in any capacity. Obviously, the biggest thing for him is just Raheem going on the side of caution, wanting to keep him healthy, get him through the preseason, get into week 1 against Pittsburgh. And there was a comment he made after practice, I believe it was yesterday, about Kyle Pitts. A lot of people have been talking about how he's just been, urging him how to run his routes, how to be the best version of himself on every play. Can you talk about Kirk Cousins' leadership to this team and guys like Pitts, like London, that could be very important for them moving into this season?
Yeah, it's really the effect that this team has missed since Matt Ryan, right? I mean, we would see that from Matt all the time, kind of getting in guys' faces, pushing them to, say, hey, like, I need you here. Like, I need you. Ball's going to be right here, when, X amount of route is taken, whatever. And that's huge. I mean, if you look at this whole offense, all these guys, they're so young. They haven't had that presence to A, push them, or B, maybe get the ball to them in that situation. They've had, sorry, this car is going by me here, so I hope it's not too loud. But I mean, they're they're all very young guys, and they haven't had that quarterback to kind of get them the ball like that, whether that's Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, Taylor Heineke, guys who have left some things to be desired out there on the field. Now you get a proven commodity in Kirk Cousins. And I mean, it's also big for them because look at it from their perspective. These are guys who are still young. This guy got the ball to Justin Jefferson. This is a guy who helped this guy get all these big numbers. Maybe that can be me too. So they're probably more open to receiving that kind of criticism or, constructive criticism, however you want to call it. And it's definitely noticeable on the field, seeing where the ball placement is. I think it's funny to compare last year's training camp video of, one-on-ones catches to this year's, because it's almost night and day when you kind of look at it. But no, it's huge because Kirk Cousins obviously commands that respect just because of his track record. And I think the players are following suit.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, like you said, especially for guys like Kyle Pitts, who people have been wanting to break out for so long. Just getting that guidance needed to help him maybe take the next step, help him, learn how to be a better player and make, certain adjustments to his game that helps him improve. Now, obviously, a couple of days ago as well, before the preseason game, the first depth chart was released for the Atlanta Falcons. Just wanted to get your quick thoughts on the depth chart. Was there any surprises to you on the depth chart? Was it pretty much what we expected? And, just any reaction?
I'd say the immediate reaction is nothing was too surprising. And that's just, because we've been around the team, so maybe we have been exposed to what we were going to be expected. I think maybe the biggest thing that stood out to me is how low D'Angelo Malone was on the linebacking depth chart. And he's actually a name, excuse me, some sirens about to come through here, so I hope it doesn't get too loud. There we go. But no, it's funny. I actually mentioned him as a name back in minicamp as a name who could be, a surprise cut, because the linebacking core is so deep, Bryce. It's probably their deepest position group on the entire defensive front. Just the guys they have there, the bodies they have: Nate Landman, Caden Ellis, Troy Anderson, Lorenzo Carter. You've got a lot of good starting capable bodies in there that can Arnold Ebiketie, who can come in there and make an impact. So I think it was a little bit shocking to see him last on the depth chart, just given, his draft selection, where he is, that kind of thing. But other than that, I don't think there were too many surprises. At the beginning of camp, you did see a lot of DeMarco Hellams and Richie Grant DeMarco Hellams and Clark Phillips taking some first team reps. But as I was saying earlier, it seems like Mike Hughes and Richie Grant have kind of taken the reins of that, and it reflected on the depth chart. Those two guys being, the starting roles for the time being. But outside of that, I think everything was as expected per se. That could still change. We've got 2 more preseason games after this one, but for the time being, I think that's what we're going to be looking like.
Yeah, and I think too, even with that, I feel like camp is where you kind of can rotate guys, do different things, and sometimes it's not always reflective of what you think the depth chart could also be for certain people, but you always know, well, this player should probably be here. We've seen it before where a guy who's going to be a starter was listed as a third string in the depth chart. It's just part of the process. One guy that I think I want to ask about on the defensive side of the ball, especially on the defensive line, is Arnold Ebiketie. He's a guy who a lot of Falcons fans are hoping takes the next step this season. He's listed as the starter on that depth chart as well. So that is maybe a very, happy sight for Falcons fans. He hasn't necessarily been number one on the last couple of years on the depth chart and works his way into the lineups as the seasons go on. He obviously has to take that next step as a pass rusher. And then him and maybe even Braylon Trice you may see, because I've heard him taking first team reps, seen him taking first team reps. We've heard at the joint practices when he came back, he was able to get a couple of pressures. Can you just talk about those two guys and maybe their importance to this defensive line in terms of creating pressure, as that's one of the biggest questions that the Falcons have on defense?
Yeah, well, first of all, Arnold Ebiketie is going to have to be that guy for this team. He's the de facto edge guy. He was drafted last year to be that guy. He got a first year in the system, and now it's really a make or break. It's tough to call it a make or break here in year 2 in a system, but the Falcons need a pass rush desperately, and he was drafted to be that guy. So that being said, he has had a very good camp so far, especially down here in Miami. He's created some pressures, which is obviously what you want to see. And maybe he can take that next step. But, Braylon Trice is another guy who I thought was a steal where they picked him in the draft. I thought he was a very high impact player for the draft position. And, he obviously has a lot of familiarity with Jimmy Lake's scheme here, so that could be another big thing. Again, we talked about the depth earlier. I think that is going to be a huge aspect of this defense. A lot of situational type packages that they may have these guys in, whether that's Ruka Roro on the defensive line and, getting a guy like Braylon Trice to come in there and do some things. So, or Brandon Dorless as well, get some other guys in there, another rookie. So I do think there's a lot of potential for mixing and matching and kind of putting guys in different situations, instead of that per se, this is our starting group, this is what we're going to look like at all times. I think there's going to be a lot of different mixing and matching on this defensive line where we see guys like Arnold Ebiketie and Braylon Trice put in a situation where maybe the play is designed for them to get to the quarterback, and that's their focus for that play.
Yeah, and I think obviously, for the defensive line, if they can take that next step and create pressure, that will do wonders for this defense. Some people believe this defense is supposed to fall off a cliff after last year, and I'm not 100% convinced of that, but I can see maybe why some people feel that way because of some of the concerns that they have. But there are still a lot of really good players on this defense, like AJ Terrell, Jesse Bates, Grady Jarrett, Davion Yamada, all those guys who can still make an impact and maybe help those young guys and some of the guys in these key positions help play much better in their position and what their role is on the defense. As Raheem Morris has mentioned to us multiple times about role clarity and that helping the overall product on the field. So looking towards the preseason game, obviously this is kind of where we're getting into the Michael Penix show. He will be the guy with Kurt not playing. Can you just talk about what you want to see from him? And then maybe also what are other things you're looking at wanting to see while being in Miami and just with the team?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Michael Penix Jr. is probably going to be the highlight of what most fans are going to want to see, especially given the fact that Kirk has been all but assumed that he's not going to play in this game, even though he does want to play in the game. No, I mean, the thing with Michael Penix Jr. is you want to see him, figure out how to overcome adversity because it's going to happen. You're going to throw an interception or two. Maybe it's not this game, but, whether that does happen, you want to see how he responds to a situation like that. That's going to be big for me to see from him. I want to see him spread the needle. I mean, that's his game. He has the arm strength. That's the big thing with Michael Penix Jr. is he's able to flick that thing and it can go a mile. So I'd like to see him kind of show that off. Now, granted, he's not going to be working with probably Drake London and Kyle Pitts, all those types of guys, depending on what time he comes in the game. But no, it's the time for him to really get his feet wet and to really see what works and what doesn't work. Because again, there's no rush for him to play right now. It's not like he has to really show something to you in game one. He can go through his progressions and have a trial and error type preseason game if he wants to, because let's go back to the drawing board. Let's see what you did here. Let's see what didn't work, what does work. He's talked about this, kind of being in the film room with Kirk Cousins and Zach Robinson and how they dissect this film and how they kind of go on to the next practice. And yeah, I mean, that's what I want to see from him. I mean, I think that's all you can really expect to see from him, in preseason game number one. It's not going to be, or maybe it is, maybe I'm talking too early and, he lights it up and plays 3 quarters and, you're like, wow, he seems ready to go. So, it's all subjective depending on what happens. But no, I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table. And I know a lot of Falcons fans are. But yeah, I mean, preseason games are all situational. That's what they do. They put them in. It's not like it's very different. I know a lot of fans may see the preseason game and like, oh, like they lost the preseason game. No, I mean, there's times in a preseason game where there's, let's call it 3 minutes left in the first quarter, and they put them in there like, hey, we want you to run a 2-minute drill. Like no rhyme or reason, but like we just want to see how you do in this situation. It's not like we want to score on this possession to win the game. I don't think that's the mindset these teams are having in the preseason when they're trying to do that. They want to put these guys in looks that they've been practicing all week, and they want to see how they respond to in a game environment. So that's kind of what this is all about.
Yeah, I think what's going to be interesting too is, how he adapts, like you said, to adversity through different things. How does he continue to grow through that? He's been someone in camp who people have been like, he's been the one who's pushed the ball more. That's kind of what he's been at Washington. He's more of the aggressive quarterback in terms of moving the ball downfield which can lead to him not maybe having the same completion percentage numbers that Kurt has, but also can lead to more bigger plays for the offense. So it's very interesting the contrast in styles that both quarterbacks have displayed in camp so far. Now I'm gonna have my last question, which is kind of a 2-part question. first part of the question is, what is your take on the running back 3 competition? As I know a lot of people maybe believe Jace McClellan would have gotten that spot, but Carlos Washington has had a strong camp so far. And then also with the Rondale Moore injury, how does that impact the receiver spot? Rondale was looked at as a guy who was probably going to get one of those spots. Does this open the door for a James Washington, a Josh Ali, someone else to potentially get on this roster? Or is because I believe unless the Falcons keep 6 receivers, they may keep 5, and right now maybe the head of that snake is Cordell Hodge.
So again, we're about to have some sirens come by, so I apologize for the loudness here. But no, I think to answer both your questions, I think it's Washington squared. I think Carlos Washington has the advantage pretty clearly, I think, for that running back 3 spot. Jace McClellan, obviously, the draft pick, the Alabama, system, working in Nick Saban's scheme. But I do think Carlos Washington does have a clear edge there at running back 3, just based on the reps we've seen, based on, what you see at practice. I mean, that's all you can go off of, right? But it does seem like that is pretty clear at this point, that he is their number 3 guy. But I know they've got a very deep room. You got Avery Williams in there too, who's obviously probably primarily special teams guy, kick returner, that type of thing. But, if you remember a couple of years ago, he was making a lot of high impact plays there, switching to running back and kind of being a element for the passing attack there out of the backfield. So it's a very deep room right now, having those 5 guys in there. I do expect to see one of them cut. Would not be surprised because it's a deep room. You're going to have to make some cuts at some point. So, you have that. But as far as wide receiver, I expect to see probably Ray McLeod and James Washington probably to have the advantage there. James is at a pretty decent camp there. Ray McLeod, obviously, you bring him in via I'm not sure if it was a trade or a sign, free agency, I think that's what it was. But yeah, I expect them to kind of just basically be bumped up. But I do think James Washington has the advantage over Josh Ali, for instance, being back there in the receiving corps.
Yeah, and so it'll be interesting to see how this roster shapes out as we get into the first preseason game of the year for the Atlanta Falcons. Miles, I appreciate you coming on, man. I know, obviously, you're doing this when your room's getting clean, so you've been outside dealing with the outside elements, but I appreciate you pushing through, my guy. Let people know where they can find you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Post all my stuff mostly on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it today, at Miles Garrett TV. It's where I post our daily stories, our videos from practice. I'll post it on my YouTube channel on occasion, just Miles Garrett. I know you'll probably find a bunch of Cleveland Browns videos, but that's usually where I post most of my stuff. And, for any TV watchers in Atlanta, you can tune into Fox 5 Atlanta. Sports usually comes on at 6:55 and 10:45 at night. So those are the times where we post all our sports stuff.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you, Miles. And obviously, guys, y'all know where to find me. Bryce_2K on Twitter, across all social media. Obviously, watch this on YouTube. Definitely subscribe to the channel, like the video, as we will continue our Falcons coverage as the preseason goes on. Getting into the first game of the season against Pittsburgh Steelers at a very exciting time for Atlanta Falcons fans. But I'm Bryce. That's Miles. We'll see you next time.